Hey, my name is Patrick, and today we're going to talk about the proper pressure for the inside of your boiler. Alright, so for whatever reason, we started with the two images or the two Pressuretrols. They're responsible for shutting down your boiler when the internal pressure of your boiler reaches certain pressure, and then kind of when the pressure starts dropping down, then they're supposed to allow the internal switch to turn the boiler on again. Let's talk about pressure, whether we need pressure in the boiler or not. So let's talk a little bit about theory. Let's put those guys aside and then work with our drawings. So this is like a schematic of a typical, some kind of steam heating system. We have a boiler right here. The boiler, of course, is at first filled with water. And then as we give some heat to our boiler, let's give it some heat. Sometime later it starts producing steam, and that steam starts going places, and those places might be, let's say we have one vent here, another vent here, and of course we have a bunch of vents on our radiators. Connect via razors to our main pipes. Again, this is schematics. Of course, there's slightly different piping in the real world scenario. And then, of course, the steam goes places and goes places. All right. Now, then it goes into the side radiators. It fills one radiator with steam. It fills another radiator in steam. And again, this is schematics. I'm not working about the venting, the size of the vents. Right now, I'm just assuming all of it is somehow balanced. It's working a certain way. Then it goes to yet another radiator, fills it with steam. Yet another radiator fills it with steam. And then let's say it goes to this vent and then goes to this radiator, fills it with steam as well. And hopefully that steam is going to be working better than this marker that's dying on us. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Then when steam hits those air vents on the radiators, the steam hits what's called the vents on the end of the mains. By definition, by the function of the vents, is that they're supposed to close and trap the steam inside when they are exposed to steam. So all of a sudden, this vent closes, 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 and also this main closes, this main closes. And the idea is that it stays closed as long as it's surrounded by steam, by hotness of the steam. As you know, the steam inside the radiators, when it's exposed to cold of the rather relative cold of the radiator, it collapses, it condenses, and then all those radiators now all of a sudden have condensate, at the bottom of the radiator, returning back to the boiler, the bottom of the. And that condensate, of course, both besides partially warming up the radiator, also kind of creates the cools off the radiator, because of course the purpose is not to have a hot radiator, but the purpose is for the radiator to give out its heat to the surrounding space. And as it's doing, the vents would in return again open up, waiting for more steam to materialize and enter those radiators, and the circle would kind of keep on repeating the cycle over and over and over. That said, though, let's assume that we have partially filled radiators, as in the vents have closed, and yet the thermostat, wherever the thermostat is, let's say we have the thermostat somewhere here, is still not satisfied. The room has not heated up enough, so the thermostat keeps on calling for heat. Of course, the boiler doesn't care. The boiler, if it's being asked to produce more steam, then keeps on producing more steam, and it keeps on working. The problem with that is that the steam now, because of the closed vents, the steam has nowhere else to go within the system. So because of that, the pressure inside the boiler builds up. And then what ends up happening is this is basically the wasted, let's call it the wasted energy, because you're paying for the energy to heat up this boiler, and at the same time that pressure indicates that there is that steam has nowhere else to go from the inside of the boiler. And so for that, we have those devices like those Pressuretrols that are meant to shut down the boiler when it reaches certain steam pressure. So what is that correct steam pressure? So the general consensus is that you should set your Pressuretrol to shut down between 1.5 and 2 psi. That's a lot. Again, there are reasons why this setting was set, and partially it's because those Pressuretrols are notoriously not particularly precise at such low levels. Like, for instance, this Pressuretrol doesn't even have 1 psi set. The scale starts at 2. There's a line indicating 1, but quite frankly, the manufacturers on purpose probably didn't add even 1 to it, because they knew we don't know whether it's 1, it's half a psi, who knows. So at such low pressure level, 1.5 to 2 psi, those Pressuretrols are not particularly precise. So because of that, like a 1.5 to 2 psi is kind of like a standard. It's like it's low enough for those Pressuretrols to somehow be reliable, and it's still high to such an extent that you don't want to run your system at such high psi. Partially because all of that psi is a wasted steam. In other words, the steam builds up pressure inside the boiler, while that steam has at this moment nowhere else to go. So in other words, the boiler is working for no reason whatsoever. In other words, in a perfectly balanced system, the moment the radiators give off enough heat to satisfy the thermostat, the pressure the boiler shuts down, and there's no buildup of pressure whatsoever. Again, maybe just tiny amount of poundage, like let's say quarter of a pound of a pound psi. Anyway, so as a general rule, if you want to follow the kind of accepted wisdom, you should set your Pressuretrol to shut down the boiler at 1.5 to 2 psi. 2 psi is a lot. 1.5 should be your maximum. If you have access to more precise control devices, that is not Pressuretrols, but this thing called Vaporstat. Vaporstat basically is like this Pressuretrol, but the diaphragm right here is much bigger. So because of that, the manufacturer can deal with the bigger or more nuanced pressure increase. Then that Vaporstat you can set from very precise settings. So if you were to have a Vaporstat and neither of those are Vaporstats, you can press set to your Vaporstat to shut down the boiler at say 0.75 psi or something. Again, we don't want pressure inside your system. Now, there's a caveat to this conversation, because well-designed system with enough of main venting and decent amount of venting and kind of decent amount of number of radiators, the pressure from 0 to let's say 1.5 psi might build up quite slowly. So let's say, and again, you will not know it till you install some sort of low pressure gauge, like this one, for instance. So this is 0 to 5 psi. Most boilers have by code required gauges go from 0 to 30 psi, which means you would barely see any movement on the scale. Meanwhile, on this one, 0 to 5, if you have your Pressuretrol correctly set to, let's say, shut down the boiler at 1.5 psi, then of course, it's going to slowly raise that to 1.5 psi. And again, in theory, if all of the things are working properly, it will shut down the boiler. But again, remember, all of that 0 to 1.5 psi is basically a wasted steam. That steam will kind of not do anything, or rather not wasted steam, and then also wasted energy that it took to warm up this steam. So in theory, you should shut down the boiler the moment that starts the gauge starts seeing some pressure, so that you don't waste your steam unnecessary warming up the water. Now, if your system is decently working, so you will see this from 0 to the proverbial 1 psi, this buildup is going to go slowly. And I measured on my specific system in my home. It's from 0 to 1. I think I measured something like 3-minute buildup. So that means I have a working system decent working system. So in other words, the pressure buildup is not super fast. If the system is badly working, that means the vents are, let's say, undersized or closed or malfunctioning, they constantly close, then you can see that the buildup is happening way faster, and then you have to figure out what's going on within your system. And that's why one of the reasons it's great to have a low pressure pressure gauge attached to your boiler so that you can actually see things happening in your system as they happen, so that you can kind of react to it. So anyway, so let's say again, you've seen the system building up from 0 to, let's say, probably 1 psi, 1.5 psi. It takes say 3, 4, 5 minutes. And then when the boiler shuts down at the 1.5 psi, you should see quite a rapid drop to 0. On my system, I measure going from 1.5 psi to, which I have set right now. My current system is to set to 1.5 psi, shut down at 1.5 psi, and goes from 1.5 to 0 in around 45 seconds. So, it builds up to around, let's say, called 4.5 minutes to build up to 1.5 psi. From the moment where all those vents closed, and then goes 45 seconds to go to 0. So yeah, that will be the kind of good working system. That said, though, my next step is going to be to get Vaporstat, so that the system can shut down before it reaches even 1 psi. In theory, you could try to set those devices to kind of shut down your boiler at let's say proverbial 70.75 psi. The problem with that is that they are not precise enough devices, and then you will notice that maybe when the pressure that falls down, the switch might not be precise enough to actually allow the flow of electricity, so that the boiler restarts again. So you can theoretically work with those Pressuretrols at such below 1.5 psi, but it's not advisable. So the next step for me is to get Vaporstat, partially so that I don't get this, this extra, let's say, 3 minute, maybe 2.5 minutes of working time when the boiler it keeps on producing pressure, because the steam has nowhere else to go at that time. Again, it's up to you. Do you want the extra expense of spending $400 for the Vaporstat to kind of make your system work slightly better? Maybe not. It really depends, up to you. Definitely get a low pressure gauge and attach it somehow to your some kind of near your Pressuretrol, so you know what's happening within your system. Anyway, so that if you only have Pressuretrol, set your Pressuretrol to shut down the boiler at around 1.52 psi maximum. And then if you have Vaporstat, set your Vaporstat to 0.75 psi maximum. That's that. Hopefully that was helpful for somebody.